Guys, we'll give another minute for friends to join, for people to join, and then we'll start our exciting meeting. All right, everybody. We're gonna start. So today we have a very exciting meeting. We have some new people, we have some returning people, and the one second. Can you see me as the main? Okay. Very good. This is a first of several talks that we're going to have on the topic of relationships, and we're going to start with me kind of introducing myself so you can get to know me if you don't yet. I've always been interested in psychology, always wanted to know what moves people, always wanted to understand the human nature. So naturally, after high school, I went to study psychology, and just took me, a year or so to understand that psychology no longer gives the answer that I was looking for. After some searches into spirituality and more into psychology, positive psychology, my path led me to meeting my beautiful wife. And this is where kind of my experience with relationship and marriage begins. Firsthand experience. We met. 2 months after we met, we got married. 9 months later, we had our first child. Year and a half later, our second. And kind of between the first and second child is when things got really rocky. Couldn't understand why. It was really, really shaky. We were fighting, disagreements, always pointing fingers at each other. And at some point we got together and we really wanted to understand why that is. Why were we having the issues? We started listening to different people. We were looking at psychologists and books and religion, some of which I may refer to in our conversation. But what brought us through our research, is really understanding the nature of both men, the nature of women. We understood what was the root cause of our conflict. And through the years, I was experimenting with audiences, both physical and online. We led workshops. We met with people one-on-one, with me kind of at the forefront. And so today, I will share some of that experience. And the very purpose of this meeting is to understand, first and foremost, before we can even get into solving anything, we want to understand what's causing an issue, right? Just like when I go to the doctor, first thing he's asking is a series of questions to understand what is the cause of the issue, what is the cause of the problem that we're experiencing, what is the cause of the symptom that we are complaining about, right? It hurts here, does it also hurt there? And so we want to become our own healers, our own doctors, in a way that we can identify an issue and we can also come to its solution. I want to share with you an Einstein's quote. He said, He said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. I knew this quote for a very long time, but only a few years ago did I really get to understand what it means. Is that we have to study and learn how to grow so that we reach that next level of awareness, that next level of consciousness. And then the problem just disappears as if it never existed. It's just a magical experience that once our consciousness, awareness of who we are expands, we see different issues, but the old ones are gone. And part of what I do is I teach people how to build this foundation in their relationship so that they can create a very solid ground from which they can only go up and create new foundations and new layers of connection in the relationship. And so I want to start today with us really getting to understand our own nature, really getting to understand our own psychology, how we think, and what led us to having the issues in our relationship that some of us may be having. What that's going to do is that's going to allow us to kind of look at ourselves and look at our partner. And it's going to allow us to be the ones who are evaluating that relationship and see how we can begin to heal our relationship with our significant other. By the way, if you have any questions throughout our meeting today, feel free to put it in the chat. Towards the end, we're also going to have a free kind of like an interaction where you can ask questions and get answers, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But I want to share this with you if you give me just 1 second. This is where everything starts. A baby is born. Very cute, sweet little baby. Very innocent. And when a baby is born, it's a blank slate. It's born into a family, and it's born a blank slate. Nature already gives it some characteristics. It gives it, you see some kids very early on, you see, oh, that's sporty. Oh, that likes to draw. This kid likes to listen to certain type of music or to music at all. So nature already equips us with certain predispositions. But then the interesting part is how we grow from there. There's a beautiful story that I read about apple seed. An apple seed will grow into an apple tree. Doesn't matter where you put it. Doesn't matter how much you try to change it, it will always be an apple tree. The quality of the fruits, though, will change from depending on the environment. And this is where I relate it to humanity. For us, when we're born, we're also very dependent on our environment. First, we have our families. We have a little baby. We have parents. Ideally, we have both parents. And we know in many cases that we don't, but ideally we grew up in a family where we have parents and grandparents. And so that baby is if we can just really take a moment to imagine that little baby. That little baby is brand new to the world, and he's trying to build himself up and understand what is this reality that he's interacting with. Because according to his experiences, he's building himself. He learns how to talk, how to interact. He learns what's good and what's bad. He learns everything, his entire perception of the world. He learns from those around him, because they are the example, the very first example that he has that shows him that this is the reality and this is how you need to survive in it. And so we have the parents and the grandparents who teach us. Some are lucky to have parents at home. Some parents have to work, and we see the difference in experience and how it impacts people. We have entire studies devoted to impact on early childhood. But for now, we just want to kind of feel how we are molded. Later on, as we grow up, we have friends, we have teachers, we still have our family, but we also have the influence of social media, we have TV, and everything is molding us and our vision and how we see the world and how we interact with each other. What is the value of relationship? What is a good relationship? How do we develop relationships? We see all of these examples firsthand from experience. And with this experience, it forms our internal blueprint. If any of you heard of Anthony Robbins or got a chance to listen to him, he's a big proponent of the internal blueprint. Essentially, it's a subconscious schema of who we are that through which I interact with the world. It is my program, so to speak, that allows me to survive. Even if the blueprint no longer serves me, I will do anything to preserve it. My beliefs, my self-identity, my everything about me, how I interact with my other partner. And as unique a blueprint as we have for every single person in here and all around the world, and how much we see people who ourselves, who we want to defend this blueprint. We then meet somebody who somehow compliments us and we want to like him. We want to be liked. We enter a certain play of a character because we understand through one experience or the other that we want to be in this relationship. And we have different way of interacting with one another. Which is why we see that the challenges come just a few years into the relationship, when we're comfortable enough, when the masks and the characters we used to play for each other to do all of these things that we like about one another, they begin to dissipate a little bit. Let's stop sharing. And so we start getting comfortable. We get comfortable, we begin to see who we are really, all of the good and the bad. And from there, because we never learned how to establish a foundation in our relationship, things get really challenging. And this is what I call a spiral, because it just goes down and down and down. It's one fight, another fight, another fight. And even though some good things may be happening, our focus is already so much on the negative that this spiral just consumes us until we see the divorce rate all around the world. Some countries at 50, some countries at 60, 70, some countries at 40, doing a little better. But and the environment throughout all of our relationships never stops to influence us. So we see these desires grow for, and the values that we see from the outside. The divorce is now normalized. Broken families are now normalized. We don't know how to be together. We don't know how to create this foundation. And we want to learn. So that was kind of like a very rough overview. And the purpose of these meetings is to go deeper and deeper and deeper and isolate the five parts of a healthy foundation in a relationship that we found works almost 100% of the time, especially if both partners are ready and willing to put in the effort. I mean, if you guys have any questions so far, that would be great. If not,
I do have a question, actually.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Put the video up as well. The key issue you tend to be addressing by the look of things is arguing within the marriage. That's not the case for me. What we actually end up is avoiding having any discussions, and it end up being a toxic silence where it becomes uncomfortable to a breaking point. And until recently, I moved out recently to give each other a bit of space and learn about myself. She'll learn about herself. And we've agreed in a couple of weeks to renew discussions again. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you have as your foundations. But I just thought I'd bring it to your attention that for my situation, it's not arguing that's going to be an issue. It's more the avoidance of, not that I'm afraid to bring things up. Perhaps I was too keen to bring things up and she wanted to avoid things as well sometimes. But not going through the discussions and not resolving things to a natural conclusion and making those decisions and changes and decisions to improve. We avoided a lot of things we should have really addressed earlier. But I'm keen to see where you go with this. Just I'll let you know.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. First of all, this is really good. We see that the reason two people don't fight is also because of that blueprint, because of the experience. Sometimes my experience of fighting is I don't want to lose. And so I approach this interaction as if it's a battlefield. It's not you and I creating something anymore. It's almost you versus me. And so when it's you versus me, I don't even want to enter this interaction because I don't want to win, maybe. I don't want to lose. I don't know even sometimes how to verbalize the need to build something together. And so what happens is people begin to draw farther. They can't express their needs. They can't express their wants. Maybe they tried in their own way somehow. And because our communication styles are also different, it just kind of flew by. And so I feel like, okay, well, I tried in her eyes or in your eyes, but the other person just doesn't listen to me or doesn't hear me. And so it creates even more of a distance between the couple, the partners, the spouses. So what we want to, one of the things that we do in this situation is we acknowledge, first of all, where we are. Because like when I want to talk to you, so I come, okay, listen, we have a family. Do you guys have children? 2 children. Awesome. So when there are children in the picture, it's even more important for us to show them this example of a family. Even though we have challenges, we want to see how we stick together. And it doesn't matter. Things happen to everybody. And for me, even though my wife wanted to divorce, one of the things that I got from my family is we just don't divorce. Nobody in my family divorced, thank God. So I don't even have that as a part of my identity. It's like I can't even imagine what it is. So I told her, it's like we can have issues, we can fight, we can even be separate in different rooms or whatever you want, but we can't just divorce. So we have to figure it out. So we have to sit together and we have to just put down all of our issues, not even our issues, but just listen, this is how I see the situation. I want to understand how you see the situation. And from there, we want to build a third level above ourselves where we create this mutual space. And a part of the five exercises that we do together is exactly that. Is learn how to build this mutual space where we interact. It's great to have our own space, but we also want to identify the mutual space between us where we grow and feed and allow it to kind of move us into a different direction, into a healthier direction. I hope it makes sense. Awesome. Any more questions? Comments? Okay. So I kind of ran through it. In my mind, this is going to take, this was supposed to take me a lot longer than it did, because I'm used to having interactive talks. But it's okay. We're new, so we're still getting to know one another.
I'll throw in a question. So this internal blueprint, is there any hope of changing it? Does it change? I mean, it seems like something that's like programmed into you when you're very young is pretty difficult to change. So what do we do about that? I mean, just grin and bear it, or yeah,
Awesome.
just what?
Awesome question, Ben. Thank you. Really good question. Excuse me, not COVID. So it is a very good question, right? Because if I am who I am, and she is who she is, my partner, and then we see that it manifests into something either good or bad, or a combination of good and bad. And again, it's like, okay, so I want to change my blueprint. A programmer, right? A computer programmer, he understands how programming works. There are certain laws that exist in computer programming. So he can go into a program and change the code because he understands how the code works. So here, just like we're influenced by friends and teachers and television and the books we read and everything that we consume, essentially it builds our value system, it builds our focus. And what we focus on, it grows. So if I constantly am focusing on the negative, this is what's going to grow in my eyes. Even my relationship is going to manifest itself. The moment I build around me an environment of support, an environment of good examples of relationships, whether it's other married couples, other who have children, maybe we can make friends with them through the children. And there are different ways that we can approach this, but I become a lot more sensitive and a lot more careful and selective about what comes in, about what gets to influence who I am, because essentially I understand that even as an adult, everything that surrounds me is feeding me information constantly. And so just like with a diet, at a certain point, I want to say, I want to eat good food. So I want to consume good information. I want that to grow me. I want that to change me. I want that to influence me. Maybe I'll get a mentor. Maybe I'll listen to a mentor, just whatever information is available online, but as long as it's supportive. For me, one of my big challenges in with psychology and listening to mentors online and reading the good books was that it sounded perfect. It made so much sense. And yet I reached a very frustrating point where I couldn't change myself. And I realized that although everything that I'm reading and listening to and attending all of the workshops, it makes sense, I'm not able to change. And then I went into an environment of people who were going through the same things, people who were, some were more advanced, some were just beginning like I was. They were also married, they also had kids, some of them younger, some of them older, but together we created a system where we supported each other. Suddenly, me having issues in my relationship is normal because I see, okay, other people are having issues, but they're still together. They're still working through it. And we'd have regular meetings and such, and we still do. And this is the environment that essentially really helps us anchor ourselves into something, like a seed who just gets planted in the ground, and then from there he can grow. So that's a really good question.
I got a question for you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
So I guess, is everyone here studying the same thing?
No.
Okay. So if I understand my foundation is built upon the environment around me at an early age, but just like you use the computer programmer, he understands that there's a sub foundation to that, right? And how that foundation is built. So in the addressing the way like maybe Jamie or Ben were asking the question, I can change my blueprint if I can understand the coding to how the blueprint was created, right? So I have to be able to go beneath my understanding. Is that what you're saying?
No. No. What you're asking, and just confirm with me if you do, if I understood correctly, you're asking basically the same question Ben was asking, which is how do I get to influence my blueprint? How do I change? How do I become a different person? The type of person that can have the type of outcome that I want. Right? So if we're talking about a change of a blueprint or a change of a formula, whether it's mathematic, the challenge is that we're talking about human beings. So along with everything, I get the emotion and the resistance of experiencing growth. A plant also gets resistance. A rock gets resistance. Everything that's living gets resistance. But for me, because I'm so sensitive and I'm so in touch with my feelings and my emotions and that blueprint that is my world, it's a lot more challenging for me to grow because it's a lot more painful. I experience it. It's like raw. It's a raw wound. So that's where the support comes in, so that my focus gets out a little bit out of myself because there are other people around me. I can relax a little bit. I don't have to be constantly on the guard. Part of the challenge of growing up in the society that we grow up in is exactly that. I feel I have to prove myself. I have to, it's like I'm always under attack. For me, anyway, my experience is like, I have to be good for everybody because, it's like at school, you're being judged for your grades. At home, you're being judged based on your behavior. Any interaction, I'm being judged. So I never have a chance to just relax and be myself unless it's my friends. And sometimes, most of the time, my friends aren't the best type of influence. So although I can relax with them and kind of be myself, we influence each other, not for the better most of the time. Unless I'm lucky enough to be in the environment where I'm both accepted for who I am without any judgment, and I can relax. And I know that although I'm not perfect, I do have an environment, I do have a mentor, I do have a place where I can grow, and it's okay that he's been through what I've been through, or he understands where I'm at, and there is no judgment, there is only growth from there. So that type of mentality allows me to shift my focus from what's happening inside of me, essentially from all of my inner thoughts and feelings, to come outside of myself and focus on somebody else. And this is where the healing happens, because then I begin to focus on my wife and her needs, and I'm able to kind of work with her also in different ways. I can have conversations in a way that pull both of us outside of that place where we have to constantly guard against one another, into a place where we're building and creating together.
Just a thought, I think, on that, if I can, to add something. From what I've read, and I've done a bit of reading recently, different sites and different psychological tests and evaluations and things. And I think it even goes back to, it might even be before Viktor Frankl, actually. Everything you said, I believe it to be true so far. Insofar as, yes, there's a blueprint. Effectively, what you're talking about is an external accountability source. Yeah, perfect. We need to be held accountable. And to have other perspectives outside of her own. Yet, I also think there is some flexibility within that blueprint. I mean, to say you can't change, ultimately, yes, but it's how it's manifested in certain situations. One example of that, I think, would be to say, well, I've recently done the Big Five personality test. So I don't know if you're familiar with it. And one of them that sits strongly with me, at least, is I've got to be in control of the environment. Now, at work, I'm a branch manager, so I can put things where I like. I can have systems in place and control schedules to be, to get the certain task done. I'm currently living in a room on my own. I can put things where I like. I know everything's in order. I mean, my bed's made. I've got everything, where it needs to be. At home, my wife doesn't appreciate that sort of skills. So often there's conflict there when the house is unkept. When I come home and the bins aren't taken out because the boys haven't taken them out. When there's, new things all over the place. My wife isn't as tidy, for example, as I am. Is that a fault in me or a fault in her? You see, that's where I'm sort of saying, okay, so I know it's going to be, say, for example, one of my strengths. It's not going to be her strength. How do we then mesh up those two? And that'll be where there's got to be flexibility in that blueprint. While I'm oriented one way to be in a particular fashion, which in its own right is a strength, it does cause conflict in certain situations. So therefore, I need to approach that situation saying, well, I know I'm going to be confronting this each time. That's been a big challenge for me recently, I've got to say. And it used to do my head in. I'd get home and, after a long day at work or whatever, and a dozen things could go wrong. And, I'm already wound up and I'm going to come home to a mess and I've still got to cook dinner and the kitchen's all already messy. I don't know how to operate. It does sort of, she hasn't been very accommodating as far as that goes, for example. But no doubt there's other areas on her side as well where she has different strengths that I'm not seeing or meeting or whatever. So there needs to be sort of a meshing between those two. So I think while there is that blueprint, an awareness, a self-awareness on that, saying, well, look, I know in this situation it will require more, this will require less. I've got to navigate a certain situation. It's how I think, personally, how I react. How that blueprint manifests in certain situations. I think that's what we have control over is our actions and our behaviour because of it. Is it fair to say that? Or, I mean, just from what I've read elsewhere as well.
Some of the one of the things is when I got into, just to comment on what you're saying, because everything you said makes sense. For me, though, what it did for me, learning all of this, is it put me in a place where I was just doing constant calculations. And I was calculating, okay, she's good at this, I'm good at this, and instead of focusing on us, I was running calculations. And it's still a challenge of mine, but we're much better at sitting together, at discussing things, at kind of talking about the future. For a relationship, the purpose is for us to create the us, and for us to be aware of, like, you can say to your wife, listen, when I come home, I understand this is not a priority for you, the whole cleanliness thing. For me, it drives me nuts. And you can say it in a way that can be humorous, it can be funny, you can, and I'm sure she knows that at some point. I'm sure you didn't hide it for how many years you're together, right? So, but just going and doing it, or a source of conflict is when you want to put your strong suit onto her weak point. And so you're like, but look, if you just do this, it would work out. And she's like, but I can't. Like, it's not a priority for me. I have the kids, I have this, I have other things that are a priority. So the house is a little messy. And for you, because your blueprint demands it, because your internal values are like, but it's driving me nuts. And so that conflict, just you're focusing on the mess instead of putting the mess aside and seeing how you can arrange the house in such a way that it's going to suit both of you. So maybe she can give a little, maybe you can give a little, and then it's going to be a little bit better for you, a little bit better for her. And then you can take it to the next level after, let's say, 2-3 weeks, a month. You see that this is working, right? It's like baby steps where we work together to create a certain outcome. And because it was a challenge before, and you use it as a game, which is like the first step of the 5 exercises that we teach is basically, it's like we sit down, we totally distance from ourselves, and as if I'm analyzing myself from a third person point of view, I speak. This is Alex. Alex really enjoys X, Y, and Z. Alex's childhood experience, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm analyzing myself from a third point of view. And it's a lot easier too. It's a lot more comfortable. In the meanwhile, my partner learns more about Alex as well. This is like one exercise that we do. But the friction is also good because the momentary friction, the momentary spark of fire, it allows you to then, once it simmers down, create stronger connection above it. To sit down and really talk about it. Man, this happened again from a third point of view. I didn't mean to do it. It just, I blew up. And then you get to talk about the situation and build it up again over it, because a relationship is constantly, it's not putting out fires, it's building like on top of them. So we have like 4, 5, 6 more minutes.
Okay, so I got a quick question regarding like the psychology side of it. Can you look at it and say, if I truly care about this person, if I love this person, my spouse, I made this commitment to, can I change my thought process, my desires to only be to fulfilling their desires? Like, can I completely nullify? Yeah, how? That's why we were talking about like the blueprints, right? I want to change my blueprints in order to meet what their needs really are. Is that possible?
That's awesome, but how? Why do you want to do this?
Because if I truly love this person, then anything I want to do is really only for them. Otherwise, it's not unconditional love, it's conditional love, meaning I only do this in order to receive a better feeling in return. So how can I just completely restrict my own desires to doing it for this person, that I only feel this reality, this marriage, this union through what it is they want, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fulfill their needs.
So then there's no problem. And this is something you want, then you just do it, right?
Well, now you're changing the blueprint though. If you don't know how to change the blueprint or your own psychology, that's what you need, is something to teach me how to change my blueprint.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Woman perspective. My husband and I have been having a really hard year, and it was because of something that I did. But in going to therapy, I have really discovered who I am as a person and how I was raised, and understanding that has given me a really different perspective. I found out that I was raised by a narcissistic mother, and in having that happen to me, I have developed a lot of narcissistic traits myself that I didn't realize that's what they were. And until you do some self-work, I don't think that you have a chance of changing and serving your spouse appropriately, because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know why you're doing the things you are. And in learning about this and how much being raised by somebody that's narcissistic can do to you, or being around them, you don't fully grasp how that molds you as a person and the decisions that you make. So for me, to change that blueprint, like, I had to dig deep and read uncomfortable books and like really figure out, like, holy crap, this is me. And do I want to stay this course and pass this on to my kids, or do I want to change and stop the cycle now?
That's awesome. That's awesome. A very, not even a very, it's just who we are, that code, that program that is us, essentially, is we are programmed to get, even just as mammals, as much pleasure, as much satisfaction, while doing as little work as possible. And so around it is built our entire identity and our entire world. Is how do I get as much as I want for the least effort that I want, even if it seems like I want to do for the other. So what Amy said is powerful, because the more I identify who I am, the more the pain of the awareness of who I am pushes me to be a different person, which is, it's huge. And this is really what we want. And if we are able to create this, this type of interaction in our relationship, where we create more areas of awareness for each other, then we are now creating our own ecosystem within the family. We're building our own fortress that is impenetrable for the outside forces. And then you begin to see the real growth start. So I know that our time is up. I wanted to invite anybody who wants to continue this conversation. You guys can message me either through Messenger or on Facebook. Many of you are already in touch with me. The goal of this is to continue maybe a few more weeks to kind of dig in and see what else we can come up with.
Do we get to learn about our blueprints here? Is this what we're going through? Are we learning about our blueprints here? Is that what we're going through?
So first, I wanted for us to understand that there is a blueprint. There is a stamp of who I am as a person, of my identity. The next step is we're going to explore rising a little bit above that, maybe trying to assume a different identity, of trying to explore how this identity can shape us into growth. How we can begin to start conversations with our partners that can relate to growth. But at the early stages, like Amy said, it's a lot about the self-growth, because that leads us to a place where we can begin the mutual work with our partners.
I've just got a quick comment if I can for Brandon. It sounds to me that what needs to happen is to find out that blueprint for yourself and how you can use that then to serve your wife. Because what you're talking about is changing who you are. And I think I've gone through that. I've been married, you asked before, I've been married 20 years, miraculously. But nonetheless, a lot of that has been sacrificial. And I've given up a lot of who I am to please her. And, I had a friend share just during the week, if you keep putting your wife up on a pedestal, she'll eventually look down on you. And I think that I've got to that point where my wife's now looking down on me. Be that as it may, I'd hate for you to get through that situation, but I think this might be a great exercise actually to say, let's learn more about our blueprints and how can we best utilize those skills that we've got. Because I don't think anything is inherently wrong in there, but how can we use that then to serve the partner, the wife? that just naturally what seems to pop up to me. But anyway, you want to wrap up, Alex? I'll leave.
Awesome. Next week, we're going to talk about the purpose of relationship and how it can lead us to greater growth. I think that for me, one of the challenges was to accept that in early stages of the marriage, that marriage is not just two people who are kind of like casually together or when it's convenient, but when you accept that there is much greater growth behind that relationship, you begin to explore new areas of who you are as a person. So we're going to explore that together. And I really appreciate all of you. Again, if you have any questions, you wanna book a call with me, whatever it is, feel free to message me back, and I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, guys.